Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined for this episode by fellow sax player and fellow resident of Hitchin, Alastair Penman. His latest album, The Last Tree, came out in the summer, and what you're listening to now is the title track. Alastair has a really interesting story to tell, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with him. So I hope you enjoy listening into our conversation. Thank you for joining me for Harmonious World, and welcome, Alastair Penman.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Brilliant. And I've got here, so you've kindly given me Do You Hear Me, which was from 2020.
Yeah, that's a much older one. Yeah.
But more importantly, and I'm very excited about this, The Last Tree, which came out in June.
Yeah.
Which is an absolutely amazing album, but also I love the concept behind it as well. So that's always a win for me when the concept is great, but the music is great as well. So let's start by talking about that. That came out for World Environment Day on the 5th of June.
Yes.
So why did you pick that day?
I have to say, actually, it was slightly convenient timing because I hadn't got a fixed date and I was looking at dates to release it, and I thought, well, that just ties in perfectly with kind of what the whole project is about. And it's because it was quite a long project coming about because the kind of the concept of the album, The Last Tree, so I initially wrote it. It's a suite for saxophone orchestra, for 14-piece saxophone orchestra. And I originally wrote it actually for the sax ensemble at Guildhall, where I teach. Because I was asked to do a project with them and I wanted to do something around kind of climate change, the environment, and then I decided it would be a good challenge to set myself to write half of the gig. So the first half of the gig was arrangements and existing music, and then for the second half I wrote this 40-minute suite, The Last Tree. And then kind of afterwards it was a really great gig actually. We had a fairly full concert hall, which was nice, and it all went down really well. The students were fantastic with it and they really engaged with the whole project, which is amazing. But I wanted to kind of turn it into an album, so it kind of lived on. And I was thinking of different ways of doing this, and I came up with this slightly crazy idea of multi-tracking the whole thing myself. And it was one of those where I hadn't particularly put a timeline on it, so to speak, but it was like every spare day I had, I'd be like recording some parts here and there. So it was a period, it was probably 6 months or so that I recorded it over. Then I kind of, because I hadn't set myself a deadline, I got it to where I wanted, and then I kept tinkering, and then I thought, well, if I don't now decide on a date, I'm going to keep tweaking it forevermore. So,
yeah.
And I saw that and I thought, well, that ties in really nicely, releasing it on World Environment Day through an album that's all about the environment and climate change, essentially.
Absolutely. So it's called The Last Tree, which is from the Cree proverb, which is only when the last tree has been cut down, the last fish has been caught, and the last river being poisoned, will we realise we cannot eat money, which is a great proverb. And I mean, I've always been of the opinion that you can't take it with you anyway, even if you have billions, we're all the same at the end.
Exactly, yeah.
The root of each of these 8 pieces is a quote from somebody about the environment. How did you choose those 8 quotes? Because they're very interesting.
So there were some quotes kind of I already knew. And then when I had this idea, I thought, right, I'm going to write this suite. And I wanted to call it, I came up with the name The Last Tree based on that quote quite early on. And then I had this idea, well, what if each of the movements is based on a different quote? And there were various quotes I already had in the back of my mind, and then I went searching and I drew up a whole huge long list of quotes. There's some absolutely brilliant stuff there, and then I kind of whittled it down to things that kind of worked with the with kind of the music I wanted to write and also the message I wanted to get across. And I also wanted to give a good range. So they do range kind of from the really sublime quotes to the completely ridiculous. One of my favourite, there's a quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer in there, who's kind of an indigenous, well, from an indigenous background, but also has studied kind of modern medicine. And one of her big things is she brings together kind of indigenous knowledge with our modern science, which I think is quite a fantastic thing. And I think actually, have you got the quote there?
Yes.
It's the one, just so I don't misquote her. I think it's towards the end, where she says, yeah, that's the one. If grief can be a doorway to love, then let us all weep for the world we're breaking apart so we can love it back to wholeness again, which I just thought is an amazing quote. And that comes from a book she wrote called Braiding Sweetgrass, which actually links to Hitchin, where we are now in a weird way, because I came across that book through in Hitchin. There's a wonderful kind of eco-society book group, essentially. It's like a walk and talk book group, and that was one of the books for the group, was this book Braiding Sweetgrass, and that was the first time I came across Robin Wall Kimmerer. I just really loved that quote. That it's just kind of really beautifully poetic as well. And so that movement is, it's kind of, there's kind of the pained beauty to the whole thing, and there's a lot of that kind of within the music, particularly the slower movements in the suite, where I wanted to write something kind of really beautiful to reflect nature, but then there's this kind of undertone of something not being right and it kind of being unsettled, and then you get the kind of the absolute contrast of that. And so there's one movement where there's a quote from Donald Trump, which is, well, yes. So what he says, it's freezing cold outside, what we need is a big fat dose of global warming. So that movement's called Big Fat Dose, and that's I did actually, as an experiment, I asked AI to write me some program notes for that movement in the style of what Donald Trump might say, and it was scarily accurate, saying, oh, this is the best blues that's ever been written. Normally it's 12 bars, but I've gone through a 21 bar sequence. And it was this kind of thing, and it's massively brash and over the top, showing how ridiculous this statement is. And that's probably one of the most fun movements to play. It's kind of, Donald Trump is almost represented by the sopranino sax, and that's the only time the sopranino comes out on the album. And it's there's kind of all these different things and different kind of strands going through the album. Yeah,
and I think the ridiculous nature of that quote, which is, you know, he's giving a pass to everybody who chooses not to do anything at the moment.
Exactly.
You know, and sort of, well, what's the problem? You know.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And in fact, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is you're also a supporter, as I am, of Music Declares Emergency.
Yeah.
Which is an incredible organisation, and I've got a couple of their T-shirts that say "No music on a dead planet."
Yeah, I've got one too.
Yeah, because it's all about musicians and those involved in music going, you know, we have to be behind the environment protection and improvement, because, you know, if we can't live, we can't play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is. I love that as a campaign, the No Music on a Dead Planet campaign, because it just does what it says. If we have no planet, then of course we have no music on it. It's kind of, and it's that thing I find more and more everything I do, there's an element of thinking about the planet behind it, and that's kind of, it's almost like that's the basis. And I this is something that gets discussed a lot, and some people don't like it, but I feel as artists we kind of have a responsibility to speak up about the things we care about. And it's like, if we have, however big or small our platform is, we ought to use it to promote things that we care. And to me, kind of climate change is the biggest issue we face, because it's potentially could lead to the end of life on Earth. And it's like, nothing is bigger than that. And it's this whole thing, kind of, I mean, politics and everything drives me absolutely mad, as I'm sure it does many people, but it's that thing we live on in this world where we live in the capitalist society, and it's all based on growth. And one of the quotes I like is that you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. And it's this thing, we have this planet of finite resources, and if we're using way more than the Earth can sustain, what do we think is going to happen? It's kind of that. And I think there are lots of statistics now about how many people are worried about climate change, and it's the overwhelming majority of people now believe climate change is real, but it's kind of trying to harness that to actually do something, because there are so many other issues everyone faces. And in a way, we're very privileged to have the kind of the headspace and the stability to be able to think about climate change and things like that, whereas lots of people are kind of living day to day, and it's just not a high priority. And politics it's all so short term. It's like always thinking about the next election. It's like it's hard to prioritise. It's not an attractive thing to prioritise fixing climate change, and it's and then I mean it's all also interlinked. We then get into all the things of the global north essentially has been exploiting the global south for a long time, and we're reaping the rewards while they're suffering all the problems. And I could talk about this for absolutely days on end.
No, absolutely, I agree. And I think it's amazing that we've got this organisation, and I think Music Declares Emergency is, brings so many people together. Because it gives us that ability to go, our music is really, really important to us, but also we know that we can't, without the planet, we're nothing. We can't create.
Yeah, and it's great that it's there. It's like a rallying point for musicians to get. It's almost like having that place where if you're interested, you can go. And it's like because that's the hard thing. It's kind of finding the other people that are interested and want to do something. And that's what music on a dead planet is great for.
Absolutely, and I think you and I both, we have a small platform. We have a specific, particular platform, niche, if you will, but it's that whole thing. It's the Gary Lineker effect, isn't it? It's like use your platform for some good. And it's okay to do that, and it's okay to speak out about things that you believe in. At this point, I would like to play a piece from A Fine Place, which is based on the Hemingway quote, "The earth is a fine place and worth fighting for," which is, it's hope, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's play a little bit of that. So at what point did you write this, and what was your inspiration beyond the sort of hope behind the Hemingway quote?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because if I'm totally honest, I can't remember what order I wrote the movements in anymore. There was kind of lots of ideas and they all kind of came at different points. But it was the whole album, actually, although it was recorded over a long time, was written in a very short period. It was, well, relatively for the size that I probably wrote the whole thing in about a month, which was largely down to time constraints, because I'd known about this project for ages, and it's that thing. There's always you always see this time in your diary, and then it always magically fills up. So it was written in quite a short space of time. And this one, the earth is a fine place and worth fighting for. I chose this as a quote because it's very easy with climate and things to get into this almost like a doom spiral of all the things that are wrong and be very kind of angry and negative. But actually, I think the hope is a hugely important part of it. And with this one, I was just thinking basically of the beauty of nature, and that's what the track is meant to represent. It's a fine place. I think it's one of the more beautiful kind of pieces on the album, and it was just trying to create these beautiful harmonies. And when I'm writing things like this, I really love the sound of, I mean, I hear 14 saxophones being so kind of homogenous, and the fact that I multi-tracked it all myself means that all the tones kind of match and blend really well. And I love it. Almost at points it's a bit like an organ sort of sound. It's that very kind of rich sound. Just this movement is essentially just meant to be a beautiful kind of moment for reflection, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and that I think is what it is. Interestingly, you talked about the 14 saxophones, and you mentioned earlier the sopranino. I have only heard the sopranino played one other place, and that was with Tim Garland, who played it, and he obviously beautifully because he's an incredible player.
Well, we always had this joke actually. So in Hitchin, where we are now, there's a wonderful place, Benslow Music, where I run saxophone courses with Jared McChrystal, and both of us had sopraninos. And there are two people on the course who sometimes bring sopraninos, and we always say, we must play some sopranino quartets, because it's the only place in the world you're going to get 4 sopraninos, probably with good reason, because it can be quite a piercing sound, but it's...
Yes, and I mean, the difficulty about playing soprano sax, which is the next one down, is always the tuning, and I assume that it's far worse with the sopranino.
I would say sopranino is by far the hardest one, I would say, in terms of tuning. I always remember when I did my master's at RMCM and studied with a brilliant sax player, Rob Bucklands, and I remember he used to say you should practice on the highest saxophone you own, because if you can play that in tune and with a stable embouchure you can play anything. So it was probably Rob that had planted that seed many years back of maybe getting a sopranino one day as a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Very interesting. That's an interesting concept. I've actually got into recently. I've sort of rejuvenated my playing of the flute, and I love it. But I'm really drawn to alto flute.
Okay.
And I've heard, in fact, one of the albums that I'm going to review later this week is Gareth Loughran's.
Oh, he's one of my favourite players.
Isn't he?
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I recently heard some stuff where he was playing bass flute and then alto flute, and I'm just like, I'm really into those lower things. But I think you're right. I think you have to be able to play a concert flute before you can play alto or a bass.
It's weird. I've actually just extended my range even further. I got a bass saxophone earlier this year, so I've got the full range now.
Wow.
Came up. I just so happened I got asked to a session that was on bass, and I rather cheekily got one out on approval, thinking I'd do the session on that, and then I liked it so much I decided to keep it. So now the whole range, which opens up a whole load of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you use bass sax on this?
So that hasn't actually...
I was going to say...
So in the original suite... Actually, no, I didn't. In the concert, there were a couple of other arrangements that did use bass, because Guildhall happens to have a bass sax, but that suite actually never had bass. It was always 3 baritones.
Yes. And then, again, it's not often you have 3 baritones in the same place.
Well, exactly. And that's the luxury at the conservatoires that we had to have 14 excellent students at your disposal with the whole range from sopranino to bass is quite a rare treat, really.
Yes, absolutely. We were talking earlier before we started recording about our mutual friend Jay Craig, and there have been a couple of times where I've been playing at the same time as him, and I'm baritone sax is my weapon of choice, and one of them is beautiful, but I think the more you get together, they're lovely.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I understand that you are planting one tree for each copy of this album sold. How are you managing that?
Yes. So kind of when I was doing the album, I was thinking of different ways I could do something to kind of actually do something as well as kind of just release the album and stuff. And I thought planting a tree would be a really nice idea, and it was something. Again, I got the idea because it was something I was already doing through this amazing app called Tree App, and I'd really encourage everyone to go and download Tree App. And it's an app essentially for planting trees, and it lets you plant a tree for free every day if you want to. And the way it works is basically kind of companies It's mostly eco companies will pay Tree App, and they show you an advert, you watch their advert, and then the money that Tree App are getting from the adverts is used to plant trees. And you can go on and you can choose from different planting sites, you can see where the trees are going, kind of support all of this. And you can, as I said, you can plant a tree for free every day, and you can also pay to plant more trees as well. So I'm kind of using Tree App to make sure that I've planted a tree for every single copy of the album that's bought.
Fantastic. Well, that's a perfect way of sort of making this last forever, really. The last tree, hopefully we won't get to the last tree because we're planting more every time.
Exactly. As long as people keep buying the album, we'll never run out of trees.
Fantastic. Well, I shall make sure that app is, there's a link to that app in the show notes. So what is next? What's your next project that you're working on?
So and actually just last week I launched a new project with the brilliant saxophonist and composer Jenny Watson, who's someone I've known. We've worked together, in fact it must be almost exactly a decade. I first met Jenny when I commissioned her to write a piece for my first album, Electric Dawn, and then since then we've worked together on lots of projects, and in fact we play in the Kaleidoscope Sax Quartet together as well. But we have this idea, we're both very interested in kind of nature and the environment, and we're both worried about climate change. And we wanted to do a musical project that kind of encompasses this and kind of does something about it. So we set up this organisation called Sound Earth Collective. And the first project we've done with this is the Sound Earth Duo, which is me and Jenny kind of doing performances. So last week we were at St John's Church in Peterborough, then we also played at the Treasury in London, and then we played an amazing installation at Chelmsford Cathedral where they've got a giant Mars in the cathedral, and we were playing underneath Mars, and it's an incredible acoustic in there, but also the atmosphere with all the lights dimmed and this Mars, and it was all set up. It was quite a cool event because people could either sit and listen or they could wander around, and there are like telescopes set up in the room so you could look through the telescopes and see different bits of Mars and things, which is amazing. And the idea behind that is all the music is inspired either by kind of nature and the environment or by the climate emergency. And I think this dual thing is really important, kind of having the beauty of nature, what we're trying to save, and kind of the hopeful side of things, but also that messaging that this kind of is a real emergency and we need to do something about it. And the music it's a lot of original material by myself and Jenny, and there's also a lot of arrangements as well. So in fact Jenny's done a fantastic arrangement we do for piano four hands of Joni Mitchell's Big Yellow Taxi, and that probably sounds quite weird, two sax players doing a piano four hands arrangement, but we both really enjoy the fact we're both kind of multi-instrumentalists, so we both play, both mainly sax players, but we also both play piano. I play a lot of clarinet, Jenny plays a lot of flute, and we've kind of done a lot of the arrangements and things and planned the concerts, so you get a lot of different sound worlds in one concert, if that makes sense. As well, the kind of the music, from a genre point of view, we kind of alluded to this a bit earlier, but some of it is kind of classical based, some is more jazz based, then we've got, like with Big Yellow Taxi, it's kind of an arrangement of a more pop song, and it's kind of a whole, hopefully there's something that will kind of speak to everyone, but it's all kind of coherent in the way it's planned and kind of the arcs of the concerts and things. But that's a project I'm really excited about. And with the collective, our hope is that it will grow and we'll get more musicians on board who are involved in kind of more different projects. We're looking at, for example, setting up a composition competition for people to write music inspired by nature and climate change. And it's kind of using our platform to do what we can to kind of raise awareness and hopefully bring together people who are interested about doing something about climate change.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds interesting musically and environmentally, so that's brilliant. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and good luck with the rest of the last tree, and let's hope it keeps going forever so that there's always going to be more trees. But thank you for joining me for this chat.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation with Alastair Penman. His album, The Last Tree, came out in the summer, and all the links are in the show notes. What you're listening to now is Last Generation from that album. But thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World, and I hope you have a really good week. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.